Okay. And I see only you right now, Aaron.
You only see me.
Yeah, but we'll change that.
Oh, I think if you put it on the other view.
Okay, I'm a little flustered right now. Where's our moderator? Live, by the way?
Sky?
Yes, we are live.
Okay, can you mute us for a second? I cannot see the slides right now.
Everin, are you sharing the slides? Are you sharing your screen?
I am sharing my slides. Can anyone else see the screen, see the slides? Okay.
All right, everyone. Hello, welcome to this session. I hope everybody can hear me. Please give me a nod if I'm audible. All right. So while we wait, let's move on to the second slide. While we kick this off officially, it would be nice to know who's in the room. So please use the comment function to share with us what city you're joining us from and what the weather is like. I'm here coming to you from New York, and it's sunny and a perfect blue sky. All right, Austin, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Chicago, Orlando, Miami, Switzerland. All right, wow, Berkeley, Chicago. All right. So clearly people are comfortable with the commenting function. That is wonderful. Okay, and with that, let's move on to the next slide. And let's kick this off officially. I hope everyone is here. Yesterday, pre-registration looked very strong. So there seems to be some interest in our topic. And so I spend too much time on social media, and recently I've been hearing some chatter, some interesting words coming up in the context of ethics and compliance, such as crowdsourcing, bottom-up compliance, co-creation, reimagining compliance in a co-creative way. And I was very curious. And so I reached out to two of the instigators of this new conversation. And I'm very pleased to welcome today with us here Klaus Moosmayer, Chief Ethics, Risk and Compliance Officer and member of the board at Novartis, a Swiss-based pharmaceutical company that everybody I think has heard of. And also, I'm very pleased to welcome with us today Francisco Esteve, Group Ethics Compliance Manager from Nestlé Group. I'm sure whether we know it or not, we will probably eat some chocolate or have some dairy product today that comes from Nestlé. It is wonderful to have you both. I very much look forward to our conversation on co-creative ethics. Governance improves when everyone participates. I'm equally pleased to welcome Evren Ezen, Vice President, Research and Analytics, ECI. One of the many amazing things she and her team does is the Global Business Ethics Survey. The most recent edition was recently launched. I'm sure all of you will hear a lot more about this throughout Impact 2021. Thank you, Evren, for being here and helping us facilitate the engagement of our participants. All right, let me tell you about the structure of our session today. Next slide, please. So first, we will briefly talk a little bit about the idea of co-creation. What does this mean? Then we will move into the really relevant part, which is how can we operationalize this idea? How can we bring it to life in our ethics and compliance program? And lastly, we will we will look into the future and say, what can ethics and compliance look like 5 years down if we pursue this co-creative path? All right, next slide, please. So to ease into the conversation, please respond to the following poll question. And Evren, maybe you can direct people to where they have to go on their screen.
Yes, so if you go to the Pathable site by which you joined the meeting and you click on polls, you will see the first poll question. So click on the vote button to answer the poll.
All right, and the question reads, in companies, what is the primary source for detecting fraud? So by which source do companies detect most of the fraud? And the 6 answer options are in alphabetical order: by accident, employee tips, external audit, internal audit, IT controls, or surveillance. I hope you're finding your way to the poll. Do you see answers coming in, Evren?
I don't see any answers coming in yet. Let's see. Okay, so there's a question. I can't see how to answer the poll. You'll need to go to the Pathable page, the main page of the Impact 2021 conference, and go to the session that we're currently in, where you joined the meeting. And under that, there's a chat button, a polls button, a files button, a people button. So click on polls and you should see it.
All right, and I think we can actually move along. It's not so essential that we do this interactively in the interest of time. There'll be a second opportunity where we can try polls again. So let's move on to the next slide, where we see the results based on the survey by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. They put out a really interesting report every year called the Report to the Nations. And what this report has found for 11 consecutive years is that by far the leading source of for discovering fraud are employee tips. 4 times more than the next, the second most important source, and more than any of the other sources combined, 61%. So already employees are participating in governance, and we are relying very strongly on them. And this is something that we also see in ECI's surveys, that employees are very willing to report misconduct that they perceive, not just related to fraud, but also to other issues. Okay.
So Karsten, I was able to see the poll results after
Great.
all. So if you'd like, I can read them.
Yes, please.
Okay, so 59% said employee tips, and that was followed by internal audit at 15%. And then 9% said by accident and IT controls. 6% said surveillance.
All right. Well, excellent. No, so everybody had the right, the majority had the right intuition. Very good. The word is spreading that employees are an incredibly valuable source for valuable information about risk, about misconduct. All right, let's move on to the next slide. All right, so now let's turn to Klaus and Francisco. Maybe you can share with us, was there a eureka moment? Was there a moment when it come to your realization that co-creation, bottom-up compliance, crowdsourcing, whatever you may call it, that this is a concept that may be of value for managing ethics and compliance in company, and if so, why? Klaus, you're nodding. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I can kick it off, and thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to our discussion, Francisco and Carsten. Thank you, everyone, for all your guidance and support. Look, I mean, the Eureka moment, maybe when I joined Novartis 2.5 years ago, the company was in the middle or in the starting phase, I have to say, of a cultural journey. And as well, the company was regarded from a scientific point of view. There was a big criticism on management hierarchies, on a lack of a speak-up culture, or what you would say more professionally, maybe psychological safety. Mm-hmm. And the whole cultural journey to get servant leadership spirit into the organization, to get feedback from associates, was around how can we co-create together, or the strategy for the company, and polls and surveys and user towns. And I said, interesting. So this is the big topic now in the company, to get the associates part of the journey and not as audience and visitors. Why can't we apply the same spirit and techniques in ethics, risk, and compliance? And the other moment was, then I stopped. I won't talk too long. Is when I came at, of course, a look at the code of conduct of the company, which was a very well written legal document, also trained and certified. But when I asked associates around the globe, what is this document for you? Are you co-owning it as an associate? Is this meaningful for you? They say it's a legal document, I have to observe, but I'm not co-owning it because I have not co-created it. I have no relationship personally, because it's a legal document, an important one. And then I asked, is it of help for you? And they said, yes, it's the guidance of the company, but then in my daily context, as I'm not a co-creator, I couldn't tell my own stories and dilemmas. And this was the Eureka moment, I would say, that we said, yeah, we can do this, something changes.
Very good, and we'll return to your code of ethics in a few minutes. Thank you. How about you, Francisco? When did you realize bottom-up compliance was a promising path, and why do you think it's important?
Thank you, Carsten, and thanks for this possibility to be here and discuss with you all. In fact, this Eureka moment, I think it came from a little maturation of an idea, and also based on past experience. In the past, I had the opportunity to work on several different topics, and one was information security. And in information security, you have a fight, or you have a confrontation between technology from one side and Bob on the other side. Bob is the average employee that do everything wrong, and in spite of all the security that you put in place, will break things. So from the security information point of view, the employee is a liability. And when I came to compliance 5-6 years ago and started working on these topics, on a company in particular like Nestlé, where Nestlé is an extremely decentralized company that relies a lot on the personal responsibility of the people and the employees and the managers. So I said to myself, I cannot use the same approach. Employees are not a liability. And on a lot of organizations, they still see the employees on compliance top down as a liability. We need to control, we need to manage what the employee does. What was my Eureka moment was recognizing that in fact the employees are an asset and not a liability in compliance. And in fact, this statistic that you showed before demonstrates that extremely well. Employees are an asset. So the idea then is how we can integrate the employees, how we can hook them into the idea of compliance, is how we can have them being sensitive and being aware and bring on top of the necessary approach top-down that you need to have, because things come from a code of ethics. All begins with what is the culture of your company, but how you can also empower the employees and have an approach that is bottom-up and that will join with the top-down and ensure that we get the participation of the employees, focalizing in our case particularly to managers. We coin a sentence that is compliance is a leadership responsibility. I'm going to say it's the specific responsibility of a manager to ensure that this team is behaving on a compliant way, and then bring this up down and top down. Up down.
You're both making, I think, very interesting points. I think, Francisco, what I just heard you say is that co-creation really starts with changing our view of employees and understanding that employees are not only risks, they're not only a liability, but they are, as you say, an asset. They bring their own values, ethical values to work. They care about being part of a respectful workplace and work for a company that makes a positive contribution to society. And so that's a human capital that we can tap into and that we can harness as we seek to promote good governance. And then Klaus, I think one point that I want to highlight from what you said is that this idea that how can people have ownership, how can they value and support something that they haven't had a part in creating, and I think that's a very powerful idea, and it reminds me of an article by Dan Ariely with the title "The IKEA Effect," and they show that indeed people who have their hands in producing something and creating something, they actually develop a stronger attachment, a stronger valuation of that product, of their own labor, so to speak. So these are very important and interesting points. Thank you. And with that, let's move on to the next slide, please, Evan. Okay, so let me give you a quick, description of where co-creation is coming from. In some sense, well, in the business arena, the concept was really put on the map by an HBR article, which is now 20 years old, by C.K. Prahalat and Venkatram Ramaswamy, two preeminent business thinkers. And they were arguing that customers have human capital, intellectual capital, but other forms of capital that the company can tap into, not only to create new opportunities to make money, but actually also at the same time create a superior experience for the customers themselves. They value being part of the creative process. And so they advocated for the idea that the consumer should be an integral part of the system of value creation in the business. And so let me illustrate that with the next slide. So the conventional model is the pipeline model of value creation. The company controls the entire value chain from design, sourcing, all the way to sales and distribution. And if you click, we'll see that the customer only comes in at the very end of this process. There's a transaction taking place and the customer's role is limited to consuming the product or service. And the next slide shows that what the two authors are proposing. They're proposing to bring the company and the customer much closer together and really open up every step along the value creation chain to customer participation. And how can this look in practice? I have a few examples on the next slide. There's a company called Vans producing wonderful shoes. And you can at home create a drawing, go online, upload a digital file, place it on the shoe, see how it looks like, click the order button, and within a week or so, you have a shoe with a canvas that you yourself have designed. An example of how customers can participate in design. The next example shows from Patagonia shows also how customers can be engaged in marketing the product. So people take pictures of themselves, their family and friends while being in an outdoor adventure, wearing Patagonia clothes, of course, and then Patagonia uses this to create word of mouth and promote their products. And the last product, the last example, Airbnb, here actually the customer almost controls the entire value chain. They provide the real estate, they design it, they provide the hospitality service, they clean up the place when the customer leaves, etc. Airbnb, all they do is really provide a platform for this activity to occur. And so what we want to propose today on the next slide is, okay, compliance and ethics management, advance one more, please. Compliance and ethics management has been somewhat based on a pipeline model. You know, governance functions, ethics and compliance functions pretty much have exclusively controlled the process of risk assessment, policy management, training, monitoring, etc. And employees really come in at the very end, kind of complying with what they are asked to do. And the question is, can we also, as shown on the next slide, can we move to a co-creative model where we look for opportunities where employees can participate along the value chain that is governance, okay? So that is the daring proposition we will pursue further today. And let's see if we can find some great examples to illustrate that. All right, next slide, please. We can move past that. I think Klaus's comments, Francisco's comments already illustrated the definition of co-creation ethics. So let's move now to the Novartis example on the next slide. Klaus, could you tell us a little bit about your Code of Ethics project and how it relates? Please move. Yeah, maybe just a heads up. After Francisco and Klaus have shared their examples, we'll invite also all participants to share their thoughts, questions, and comments. Maybe also if they can think of examples of what they have done or what they are thinking about or have seen work in other companies, that will be a great moment to chime into the conversation and share your thoughts. But with that, let's go to the next slide and let's hear from you, Klaus. Tell us about the Code of Ethics project and how it was co-creative.
Yeah, thank you. So it was co-created still at the start in the time before the pandemic, where we said, look, based on, as I said, this code of conduct, which was a legal document, what do we need to do as part of the cultural journey to focus on ethics, but really go in the direction of co-creation? And the idea, was we had this one sentence, a new code of ethics written by associates for the associates. So that was a little bit the idea we had. And we started small. We had an outreach. We had first people interested outside the ethics, risk and compliance function. We had the first virtual town hall. We had already 500-600 people across the globe participating in an open discussion to gather ideas. And then we opened, still before the pandemic started, a digital platform to gather ideas about our ethical commitments for the new code of ethics. And we had then at the end several thousands of associates on this user town virtual platform giving their views. And it's, of course, became much more broader than classical anti-bribery, which is one of our 22 commitments. But it's also about human rights. It's about fair working conditions. It's about ethical use of artificial intelligence, for example, right? Topics, environmental topics, which are close to the people, which are owned by the people. Mm-hmm. So, and we broadened this then, and this was, in all the pain and sorrow of the pandemic, a positive outcome of the pandemic, as our digital, capabilities became bigger and more powerful. We could literally involve 10,000 of associates around the globe, not only in creating in the code of ethics, but also in what we call an ethical ecosystem around the code of ethics, which a decision explorer, where you virtually can put your biases in and you find in an ethical dilemma, not an answer, but a support from the system about your biases, people you can contact, resources, toolkits. So the idea is not only let's co-create a new booklet, a code, let's co-create a toolbox and an ethical decision or supporting framework around the code cost. And so over time, we could involve thousands of associates from a diversity and inclusion perspective, extremely important around the globe in this process until we came to the code, which was then, of course, duly approved by my colleagues on the executive committee and the board, and then rolled out in a 1 week in the ethics week in September 2020, which totally went out of our hands. Because when you own something, you are proud. And we had really in all the countries, it was really crazy. All the associates really in town halls, in virtual town halls, in activities, in gaming, engaged to promote their own code of ethics and their own footprint in the country. And this was really hilarious to see.
Well, that's really interesting. And we have a short video that you shared with us, and we want to show it to, we want to share it with all participants. Evan, if you can forward to the next slide, which will give a quick, just visual impression of what the code looks like. No, one more. So these are screenshots from the code, and then we move on to a quick video, which is very interesting. Yes, I see comments saying they hear no sound. I don't hear any sound either, which is a bummer because there is some really great music, overlay to this video. Yeah, I really like this movie because it illustrates some of the points that you've just been sharing with us. So first of all, of course, the co-creative process in producing this code is highly interesting. Some have done that, but it sounds like you went a few steps further. Really using technology today we have technology, we have collaboration technology. It makes it possible, it makes it easy to get input on a large scale from tens of thousands of employees and to analyze that data and make good use of it. But there's another piece I think that's critical to this co-creation topic that you emphasize and which comes across so nicely here, which is once we talk about co-creation and once we understand that people have capabilities that we want to leverage, our focus really shifts towards supporting. You used the word support. We didn't want our code just to be a text, a book. We wanted it to be a toolbox. And this was nicely shown. You know, you help people analyze their situations. I believe this is all part of the intranet. Is that right?
Absolutely, it's on the iPhone, it's on the iPad, it's on the intranet, and we're tracking the numbers. We have more than 55,000 actually people engaged on the platform as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, you know, if you have this co-creation moment, you always have the question, what is next? How you make this sustainable, which is a big challenge. Let's be open.
Mm-hmm.
And our idea to continue the co-creation by offering the support, the conversation. You see, you can reach out to colleagues directly about a dilemma, to go on a Miro dashboard, to flag this out and share it with someone you trust. These are topics where we try to keep this on the agenda, the co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
If not, it's just another project, and you move to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing this. Let's move to Nestlé now, and you, Francisco. I just want to point out here that the word ethics is spelled out with, I believe, many faces of your associates. I think conveying very nicely that spirit, that same idea. All right, next slide, please. And Francisco, over to you. You have created a compliance portal. Tell us a little bit more. What's the purpose of this portal? And how does it facilitate co-creation in ethics and compliance? And I think here we want to have a look at your screen.
Yes, I will share my screen. In fact, what we are doing, or the approach we are taking, is I will show you. Tell me when you see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right. So in fact, we are showing the information on different ways. So we have an old tool that is where we have the information for all the employees. This tool is changing soon. And here we have general information for all the employees, like any other function, about, in the case of compliance, about the code of conduct, about a certain number of activities. Aside to that, for example, if I look at something like CARE, that is the program for social audits, we are giving just general information to all employees about why we are doing that, what it is, what are the components. There is a presentation that the people can go if they want to know a little more, and how to contact us if they have more questions. This is what every employee in principle is looking into that topic. Now, when we are focalizing on the managers that we want to bring these things bottom up, we are at the same time showing a separate place that, okay, that because I have here this, I cannot show. Excellent. Because I have the bar, this bar here. Okay, how we take this bar out? There it goes. Okay. Sorry, this portal is organized on a way that is giving access just to specific communities that we want to. For example, for the same topic that was this CARE program, people of HR employee relations, that they are the people that they should run those audits, they have a lot of other information, including the process, including reporting, training, videos, documentation, presentations, etc., 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 access to the tools, contacts, etc. So by doing that, what we are doing is creating visibility and giving everybody that needs to be involved into a topic or that needs responsibility into a topic, full disclosure of everything that they need to know on that area. So this is proving quite successful. So for example, this part that is for access for the manager responsible for the teams, we have an average of about 100 visits per day. We have other sites that go up to 2,000 hits per day. So we follow that really there is usage of those tools. In the particular topic of teams or groups, what we have is instructed managers and giving them the information on how to take responsibility for the compliance into their own team. So top down, we are telling the people we have a code of ethics. We have a certain number of topics that are important for the company, like sexual harassment, for example. It can be diversity. It can be any other topics that relates to ethics, that relates to the behavior of the people, the code of conduct, or ethics views, and those are common topics shared across all the teams. And we are telling them beyond that, you are doing a certain number of activities and your activities are generating risks for the companies. It's your role to evaluate those activities and tell us what are the measures that you are doing to mitigate those risks related to compliance. Mostly, of course, there are some operational risks, but in most of the case, it can be just risks that they are related to the visibility of the company or the reputation of the company. So in this place, we have created access to training, this compliance as a leadership responsibilities, and half-an-hour training that try to sensitize managers about their role related to compliance. And then we give them presentations and a certain number of tools. So this is an explanation of this topic, what is expected from them, what are good practices, and why compliance is needed, or what it means for all the employees. Yeah. And then we give them tools. So the theory, we give them a simple way to do a risk analysis based just on a 2x2 quadrant. We give them a risk universe. So what are the risks most common that you may need to look at? We give them this common criteria. So what is the things that the company expects from every employee? Yeah. And we let them go based on that. We give them a certain tools like a self-assessment so that they can evaluate the work that they are doing, and we just let them go. That is the approach that we are taking.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Francisco. And again, I think what comes out very nicely here is this idea that once you embrace this bottom or crowdsourcing approach to promoting ethics in the organization, a lot of the attention shifts from telling people what rules to obey. Sure, that's still important, but if you want people to participate in governance, you really need to empower them with the tools that they need to do that job efficiently, competently, and I think that's what I see as the value, what your compliance portal demonstrates very nicely. I also very much appreciated the Goethe quote that I saw there. What government is best? That which teaches people to govern themselves. So I think that's very much in the spirit of co-creation. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, it's time now to hear a little bit from our participants. Having listened to Klaus and Francisco, what's on your mind? Do you have questions or comments? Do you have ideas you want to share? Maybe examples about co-creation in your company and things we could do in ethics and compliance with co-creation. If you want to chime in with your voice, please unmute yourself. I personally would love it if some people took the opportunity to speak. We also have questions and comments coming in through the comment function and the Q&A function, so we can look at those. But first, let's see if somebody wants to share something via the microphone. Please unmute yourself if you would like to speak.
Yes, so hi, this is Kate Schultz. I am the recently retired Chief Ethics Officer from Transamerica, but I really liked the Novartis approach to the code of conduct or code of ethics, and what an excellent time to launch something like that to help employees feel like they're still part of an organization, no matter if they're working remotely. That was really well done. I have a Stone Age example of that. It seems we years ago, Transamerica is part of a global company, Aegon, and we were trying to come up with our first set of values, which wound up being the foundation of our code of conduct. And we used a survey at the time because we didn't have all these Zoom tools, and translated that survey into all the different languages of our organization. And we were really trying to come up with words that captured the culture of our global organization, no matter where the business unit was located. And we were able to pull input from over 1,000 employees around the world, and then got together in a room using representatives from all those different country units. And that's where our values came from. So I loved that it was a bottom-up approach, and I agree, people felt invested in the language that we came up with. And your example is sort of what that looks like today. Really well done. I liked it a lot.
Thank you,
thank you, Catherine. And I really admire this approach already years ago, because today it's even simpler, as you said, and that's it's great to hear. And and by the way, there are no limits. We are using the code now also in the recruitment process. So we're using ethical dilemmas of the code and the code itself on the platform when we do interviews with potential new associates. And this gives you interesting insights into a different way of co-creating, even before an employment, just to see, if you interview a sales rep and you have an ethical dilemma suddenly in the interview, how do the people reacting? So it's a lot what we can do even more going forward. But thank you very much for the kind feedback and your own experience.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Do we have someone else who can speak to their thoughts, experiences?
This is Judith Dopping, and I am the compliance counsel for Archer Daniels Midland.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have a question for Klaus, if that is okay.
Sure.
I would just like to hear a little bit about the challenges that you guys encountered in getting like employee engagement, and given that, I mean, you had to do all the town halls and so on, and then also how long did it take for you to get everyone engaged and to get your final product?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was exactly a year. And we said we have to strike a fine balance, because as you said, the engagement has to be very focused, right? I mean, if you say that's a 5 years project, you may lose the people during the journey, right? So I believe the people, and let's face it, we are living in a world where the people are bombarded by town halls, projects, topics. And to keep the people engaged, definitely you need diligence. So the year was well spent, I would say, as from a quality point of view. But we said not longer, just to keep the momentum. But what played in our hands was, again, the pandemic, because what we saw, and I think Catherine related to this, it's a great way to keep people in the company, right? I mean, people are desperate for a family, for a home in the pandemic where they can exchange and relate. And also there are a big appetite for ethical questions and the purpose of our work, which for a pharmaceutical, of course, company pandemic is obvious. So the engagement was extremely high, and I think also due to the pandemic situation. Yeah.
Great. Let's take
Karsten?
one more question. Yeah, please.
Hi, it's Debbie Hennelly.
Hi, Debbie.
I'm on a much smaller scale. I just wanted to share that what I've done in creating codes of conduct is to crowdsource the values. Maybe it's the recovering lawyer part of my brain that didn't feel comfortable crowdsourcing the whole thing. But certainly what I find is that the values are something, if they're top down, they're something that aren't always going to come to life in the organization, right? So like Catherine Schultz, who was just speaking, I have used surveys because this was all, pre-COVID, pre-Zoom, Zoom being a verb. But having people tell us what they thought the top 4 values already were in the organization before we rewrote the code gave us a lot of input that was really helpful. Some of it, I think, was a little painful because some of the values that had already been written were irrelevant to a lot of employees. But then taking their input, writing the values, and then going forward, when we did the code of conduct training, one of the most important pieces was to say, okay, which of these are going to be the hardest to bring to life, and how can we overcome those obstacles? Mm-hmm. So I feel very strongly about values being crowdsourced now, and I'm in awe of what we're seeing here with Novartis and Nestlé.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. No, I think you make a very, very relevant point there. I think, what are the company's values? They are the values of the people who work there, right? They're the values of their stakeholders. And when the company is out of sync with those values, that's when problems occur and you have walkouts or your business partners are unhappy. So I think in that sense, it makes a lot of sense to listen to your stakeholders and understand what. But it also points to risk in co-creation, which is maybe employees express a value that management isn't all that keen about. Maybe they care about certain things that the company feels might be an impediment, if you will. Limit business opportunities or what have you. So if you want to go in that co-creative path, you have to be also ready to, go where the crowd takes you, so to speak. All right, but let's move on. Thank you all for your questions, and I love that people are using their microphone. Now let's talk a little bit about what co-creation can look like in the training space. I'm a big fan of giving voice to values, Mary Gentile's work. I've written about it a little bit, had the pleasure to co-author an article with Mary, but I have somebody here with us who is, and please move on to the next slide, who's even more an expert on this. I'm happy to welcome Anjali Weller, who is a researcher and a consultant, and she has done a lot of work on GVV. Hi, Anjali, can you hear me?
I can, Custon. Nice to be with you this morning. Thank you.
Wonderful. So tell us in a few minutes, what type of work have you done around GVV, and how do you think it can contribute to making ethics and compliance management more co-creative?
Well, I think you're asking really great questions this morning, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk a little bit about the experience that I have had with giving voice to values. I've worked very closely with Mary, and the experience I'm going to talk about today is actually collaborating with KPMG and Vicki Sweeney, who many on this session will know. She is a longtime ethics and compliance leader. And Vicki had a vision to be able to integrate GVV into the KPMG leadership curriculum. And I think a number of the ways that KPMG is thinking about GVV really supports what your panel is talking about this morning. Francisco talked early on about employees are not liabilities, right? And Custer, both you and Klaus are talking about needing to leverage those employee capabilities and understanding that that's a critical and key piece to the success of an ethics and compliance program. And I think at the end of the day, the question I would ask that GVV relates to is, do you trust that your employees have the skills or your ability to help them develop the skills to actually resolve ethical issues before they come to the ethics and compliance group, before someone needs to call the hotline? And GVV is really premised on this idea that people often know the right thing to do. And if we help them practice in advance and give them those skills, right, they really are able to be, your average employee is able to be your front line. They're able to be the people who spot these ethical issues. And before before you head down the slippery slope, they're really able to step in and resolve some of these issues before they turn into hotline cases. So I just wanted to, I wanted to say two things actually before I give you the specific example of KPMG. One is that with my researcher hat on, I did some research a few years back, and I was really interested to try to understand how our community, this community, understands the concept of ethics. So we've been talking a lot about compliance programs and that, but what does it mean to be ethical? And what I found in that research was that as a community in general, we tend to define ethics as the absence of misconduct, which is really interesting. And I have to say, for me personally and professionally, a little bit dissatisfying, because I think if I were to say to you, that person is ethical because they don't lie, cheat, or steal, you would find that dissatisfying too, right? That's not really how we think about ethics. And yet, from a community perspective, if nothing goes sideways, then we're happy, right? We're comfortable. And I think one of the opportunities that you've opened today in the conversation is, how do we actually start to really think about not just the absence of misconduct, but the presence of positive impact? Mm-hmm. And GVV is really a spectacular training curriculum to be able to help support that end. Yeah. So we know from the research that people who speak up have generally had one of two things happen. They've either seen the behavior role modeled for them, or they've had a chance to practice. And GVV is really focused on how do you give people that chance to practice. Mm-hmm. And KPMG really tagged on to a couple of really important pieces of the Giving Voice to Values curriculum that I wanted to highlight. And the first is, just like any difficult conversation, if you're going to ask someone to speak up, you need to help them build that skill set. And GVV has a very pragmatic set of exercises that help build what Mary calls a moral muscle memory or an ethical muscle memory. They're very concrete, they're very tactical, and they're really focused on effectiveness, right? GVV starts from the premise that we know the right thing to do. What do you actually do to get it done? Well, these exercises are kind of a systemic way to help build that. The other thing, and Mary's drawing off of some really interesting research in neuroscience and even kinesiology, behavioral economics, right? It's an evidence-based program. The other thing that I would say that KPMG is doing spectacularly that I'm really excited about is saying it's not enough to simply say everyone needs speak up skills, right? Instead, what does an auditor need to be able to speak up, right? This is a professional services firm. This is an accounting firm, right? What exactly does an auditor need? What is the context that an auditor is dealing with? And even more than that, what does a second year or third year associate accountant who is, in the thick of client service need? And how do you actually make this work relevant? And as a result, they've created some very, very concrete scenarios that sit at the level and at the work portfolio for each of their folks. So I'm happy to talk more about it, and I know Vicky's on the line as well, and she can talk about that as well. So
yeah, thank you for giving us that background. And I think what came through very nicely is that GVV is really a tool that activates your employees to be engaged and be, to recognize things as they occur in the environment, and then not just be a passive bystander, but actually, intervene competently based on the skills that GVV can help them develop and prevent things from mushrooming into bigger problems that become compliance problems. It's a great example of how we can promote co-creative ethics as a co-creative and shared task. Let's, with an eye to the clock, let's drive forward a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. I just want to point to a very fascinating piece of research that was done by a professor at Harvard, and it looked at two types of training. One was, let me call it offender training. So it approached the learner as potential offenders of sexual harassment and told them what not to do. The other one is a strength-based training, let's call it allyship training if you want to, or active bystander intervention training. And then they looked at the impact of both types of training. And Everin, if you do a few clicks, do like 6 clicks or so, we see that the offender type training that was based on what they call a forbidden behavior curriculum increased the share of women, a diversity measure, as part of management slightly for Asian American Hispanic women, but it actually decreased it for Black and white women, and overall it had a negative impact. Whereas the strength-based allyship training or intervention training had throughout a positive effect, and a much more positive effect than the other training. So this is very, so clearly a strength-based approach, approaching our employees, our associates, with the presumption that they have, something valuable to bring to ethics and governance, seems to work better. Yeah, please move on to the next slide. Also, the US Army is moving this. They have a very strong anti-harassment bystander intervention training. Next slide, please. And you can see that on YouTube. I encourage you, with recent harassment of Asian Americans in the United States, there's really this, for example, this great anti-harassment training available for anybody. Can sign up for free. But with the next slide, we see also that this idea doesn't have to be limited to harassment. Transparency International, together with some other organizations, and I wouldn't be surprised if Klaus was involved with that, came up with the RESIST framework, which also aims at strengthening people's skills in not just not paying bribes, but actually positively pushing back against extortion, against corruption. And when you feed people the corruption, anti-corruption messages like that, the medicine goes down much easier. All right, next slide, please. Yeah, we'll skip through some of these now, because I want to make sure I give another chance to others to speak. But there are a number of ways in which, yeah, you can cycle through that I tell you when to stop. There are a number of examples that illustrate how we can build co-creation into our value creation process, if you will. And it yields, stop right there, and I'll go one back, and it yields a variety of benefits, and Klaus and Francisco have talked about that. We can gain more insights about risks, for example, about misconduct people observe, but also our employees. They build a deeper understanding of ethics and compliance and the tools we provide. If they are engaged in producing those, they become more engaged. They build a more trusting relationship with us. They come to us when they have issues or want to report something, and overall that leads to more effectiveness. All right, we'll skip the next poll question, but I invite all the participants to fill in those poll questions after the session. But I want to give the floor again to any questions or thoughts about our topic today. Were there any ideas that resonated strongly with you, the participants? Did you get inspired? Is this an idea that you might take home and try out for yourself? Or do you have any other questions or ideas on your mind right now? Please chime in, unmute your microphone if you want to speak and share. Or Evren, can you, what do you see in our chat room and in the Q&A section? Should we pull something?
Well, earlier on, there were several questions about the Novartis code of conduct example. For one of the questions that came up a few times was whether there were analytics that were that can be derived from that, and also was the video and the technology produced in-house or externally? Yeah.
Let's try to answer a little bit at the chat, just to get the people also some feedback. So it was fully done in-house, but we had external thought leaders also consulted and also invited to our town halls, to our ethics week, to speak to the United Nations, from the World Economic Forum, from universities, from the OECD. We had Drago Coast, the global chair of anti-corruption at the OECD, also as advising us on there. But my advice would be do it really in-house. Co-creation means taking ownership, as Carsten said, ownership. If you source this out to a great agency, it will not be your code of ethics. It will not be your home. It will be the home of someone else. And then analytics, of course, very important, but be careful with the trust, because you can't use personal really data. You can use statistical data. If you give the people in this sensitive area of ethics and dilemmas and biases the feeling you look at them at dilemmas, you watch them, that's not good. But you can, of course, measure the statistics and running surveys, and this is what we are doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. And I would like to give the last word to close us out to Francisco. And Evren, maybe you can move 1 or 2 slides ahead. Francisco, so, you know, looking into the future, what do you think is next? Do you have a co-creative project on your mind? That is one question. Another question is, you know, how can we move our whole field more into a co-creative direction? How can we take the momentum from today's discussion and make co-creation become more the mainstream in ethics and compliance? Do you have thoughts on one or the other questions? We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, now I'm mute. Yes, so we are going forward with this. We are deploying now these ways of working. For the time being, is things that they are related to managers. We want to go deeper into the employees. Our belief is that you need to sensitize the people about the topic, and you need to trust them. If you empower them and you give them the possibility to manage their own destiny and to drive what they do, people tend to respond extremely well, because people, they tend to be good at that. It's what you said about this training on sex harassment. You give them hints, you tell them you have a role to play, and your role is to watch out what is happening and intervene and try to break a situation when it's happening before that it goes out of control. It's the same thing. So if you tell them you're responsible for your acts and you need to understand what are the risks linked to what you do, people respond well. And you can apply the same way of thinking to any other topics related to compliance, and this is what we are trying to do. We are now also doing that for conflict of interest. We are doing that for training. There was a question about training. For me, my personal belief is that compliance is very much about process and reporting. So we are generating reporting, because by generating reporting, you create visibility. But this reporting is open to everybody. Everybody can go and see it and see what is happening and see the evolution of activities, like, for example, training. Are the people following training? I can give you an example, because there was a question about training. Until December of this year, for 4 years, we had 100,000 trainings that they were taken by people. In 1 year, since we created reporting, we moved from 120,000 to 821,000. So in just 1 month, we did more training than they were done in 4 years, just because we created reporting and we showed to all employees. And they act, we didn't push them, they just saw. People started asking, oh, what I have done of the training that is mandatory, I have done them or not.
Yeah, no, it looks like you created real engagement. And I think this will have to do as the closing remark. We are up against the time, Evren, I think.
Yes, we are.
A very warm thank you to you, Evren, to you, Klaus and Francisco. I could easily discuss this for another hour. My biggest thank you goes out to all participants. Thank you for showing interest in this topic. Let's grow the movement, stay in touch, have a conversation. If you have questions or comments, want to share ideas, please feel free to reach out to me, or I believe other of the panelists. Please rate our session and enjoy the rest of Impact 2021. It was great to see you here in our session. Goodbye, have a good day.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks so much, Francisco. Evren, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah, that was a very good session.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you, Franz.